conflict started over 3 years ago. The conflict is the wrong word. It's Russia invaded Ukraine. It's not a conflict, it's a war. It's majority of the deaths in Ukraine are not military, are civilians. To negotiate peace, but there cannot be a permanent peace in Ukraine unless Ukraine is treated like an independent, sovereign state.
I'm standing with the State Secretary of the Polish Foreign Ministry. So thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global. Your country, of course, is a frontline state in the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. We've also seen over the last couple of weeks and months a peace negotiation that has taken off between the United States and Russia. What is your position so far on the state of the conflict, as well as the conversations that are going on between the United States and Russia to end the war in Ukraine?
The conflict started over 3 years ago. The conflict is the wrong word. It's Russia invaded Ukraine. It's not a conflict, it's a war. And Russia committed numerous war crimes and crimes against humanity by killing civilians en masse. It's majority of the deaths in Ukraine are not military, are civilians. Buildings destroyed, critical infrastructure destroyed, and targeted specifically to the extent that even the former nuclear power station of Chernobyl was hit, damaging the shield protecting them from spreading nuclear waste all over Europe, which is a really horrible act. The war is still going on because President Putin didn't decide to stop and remove his armed forces from Ukraine. As if one of your neighbors invaded Kashmir and said, we are staying there, and what are we going to do about it? Well, you would say, no, we are going to be pushed out. And unless you move out, the war will continue. This is a similar situation in Ukraine. Now we've got talks. President Trump secured agreement from the Ukrainian side for immediate and unconditional ceasefire. Russia so far rejected the call for such ceasefire. And today there's going to be a telephone conversation apparently between President Trump and President Putin. And we'll see what comes out of it. So the ball is firmly in the Russian court. So what they're going to do about it, we'll see. Europe is going to, the EU is going to stand firmly with Ukraine because we want this war to stop. We welcome the President Trump's attempt to negotiate peace, but there cannot be a permanent peace in Ukraine unless Ukraine is treated like an independent, sovereign state. Because President Putin has been saying consistently since 2007 that he wants to return to his sphere of influence, which includes all the territories of Eastern Europe until the Oder River, in other words, former border of Poland and East Germany. So he wants to exercise the Russian control over Poland, Baltic states, and Czech and Slovak Republic, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania. There's no agreement for that in Europe at all.
You know, Poland is often described as the most pro-European country. You have built a very, very strong partnership with the Americans over the last couple of years. Could you tell us a little bit about how the actions of the Trump administration, which many have seen, we were standing here in Raisina, many speakers here from Europe have expressed shock in some senses at the way Europe has been, in some senses, sidelined from the conversations between Russia and Ukraine. There's also how the Trump administration has behaved with Europe more generally. Where is the state of that U.S. Poland partnership? Is the trust in your relationship damaged?
We are very close to the Americans, and we've been very close to the Americans for very many years. I mean, at the end of the day, we started being pro-American during the War of Independence. We had military presence. We had two generals fighting in the war, Polish generals fighting in the War of Independence. And in fact, no American army officer who finished West Point doesn't know the name General Kościuszko or General Pulaski, because General Kościuszko was one of the founders of West Point, the military academy. So we have a long relationship. We still consider America to be the guarantor of our security in Europe, and we were close to them under the first President Trump, and we are close to them under this term of President Trump. Last year, we purchased American weapons for about $31 billion. And we've got substantial commitment to, we are buying F-35, fifth generation planes. We are buying 500 HIMARS. We're buying 19.6 Apache attack helicopters. We're buying Patriots missile batteries. We are buying Abrams tanks, about 250 of them, or a bit more. We've got a permanent anti-missile base in American permanent anti-missile base in northern Poland. We've got 10,000 American troops on our soil at the moment. We are completely, pro-American, and will remain so. Transatlantic links of Europe are hugely important. What President Trump did correctly, he said to Europe, at long last, you have to start arming yourself, because we are not spending American taxpayers' dollars, so you can spend your money on something else. We last year spent 4.2% of our GDP in defense. This year, 4.7%. Next year, over 5%. And we are currently, in terms of that in percentage, but the percentage, how much money it is, depends on your economy. We, at the moment, there are 32 member states of NATO. In terms of spending, we are fifth. So we are third largest army of NATO, second largest army apart from Turkish in Europe. So therefore, we will maintain our close contacts with the Americans, and we understand the desire for the Americans to say, since you are a very wealthy continent, you have to spend more money. My Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, put it very simply in the numbers. He said, why is that a continent of almost 500 million people relies on a country with 350 million people to defend them against a state of 140 million people?
Could I ask you a question? You are now, of course, heading into these US-Russia talks, where presumably there will be a deal to end the conflict in Ukraine. Does Poland and do countries that border Russia, do they fundamentally trust that Vladimir Putin and the Russian government will keep to the terms of any agreement that they sign with the Americans?
Well, it's a long way to the agreement. The Russians so far refuse even to accept ceasefire. No, we do not trust President Putin, because President Putin's words are not to be trustworthy. Last month, President Macron of France said, I spoke to President Putin more than any Western leaders. More than 20 times I spoke to him on the phone. I went to Moscow. I visited him myself. And I came to the conclusion that he constantly lies and his words are completely unreliable. Therefore, he said, I think France should spend 5% of GDP on defense. That this is the conclusion we are reaching in Europe. We didn't trust President Putin, and there's no reason to trust President Putin. I can quote what President Truman said about Joseph Stalin. He said, my predecessor, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, negotiated 16 agreements with him in Yalta. They were broken. All of them were broken. I negotiated in Potsdam 32 agreements with Stalin. They were all broken. He broke all 48 agreements. He is not to be trusted. Putin is not to be trusted either.
Tell us a little bit about the relationship now between India and Poland. We, of course, had the Indian Prime Minister visit your country. Also, of course, India has been playing something of a role, or at least wants to, has been talking about perhaps mediating an end to the conflict in Ukraine. We've seen some countries in the Middle East come out and play that sort of role, like Saudi Arabia, to host meetings between the United States and Russia. Do you think India can play a similar role? Would European countries, including your country, be open to seeing India play that sort of role?
Well, there are two different things. We have a very good relationship with India. We were very pleased to see a historic visit of Prime Minister Modi, the first visit of an Indian Prime Minister for 45 years. I was privileged to accompany him in almost all his engagements, and it was terrific. He brought a very strong team of people with him, and we signed a strategic partnership. We also signed an action plan, which we are trying to implement now to put this agreements in action. election. Yes, we are trying to strengthen our bilateral relations. So I'm here regularly. Next month, our Deputy Prime Minister, who is also Minister of Digital Affairs, comes to Delhi. Minister Sikorski, head of the Foreign Ministry, should be coming here later on this year. We've got an open invitation from Prime Minister Modi to our President and to our Prime Minister to visit India. We've got some other economic meetings and so on and so forth. So we are bilateral. We are trying to strengthen our relations. As to the potential role of India, Prime Minister Modi is one of the world leaders who does talk occasionally with President Putin, and sometimes successfully manages to temper his ideas. So yes, of course, anybody who can play a positive role in a peace process is absolutely welcome. We don't have any preconceptions in this. We will see. At the moment, all ideas what will happen next are premature, because if there's no ceasefire, there's no negotiation for peace. That's a demand for President Trump, and I think President Trump will get what he wants, because he has various means at his disposal to persuade the parties to acquiesce.
My last question to you. Europe is rearming very quickly. It's spending tens of billions of euros in terms of providing for its own security now. Poland has been leading a charge in this. Can Indian defense companies play a role in coming to the European market and providing some of the armaments and weapons that Europe needs to rearm itself?
We are expecting fairly shortly a visit of the Indian military mission to Poland to discuss various matters with our people. Conversely, some of our arms producers are already present in India and having talks with the government and testing some things. So yes, it's a two-way street, and we would like to, of course, increase our cooperation in security and defense with India.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.